Thank you. Very, very good. Any comments? Dr. Pena, anything you'd like to add? Okay. Very good. Another question. Yes, gentlemen, right here. There's a microphone coming to you.
I have a question for Dr. Price. From the perspective of Norman Borlaug Institute, what do you think is the main barrier to put all the knowledge, the technology, the investigation that you have done during all these years in hands of producers?
I'm sure that Dr. Borlaug would say that it's literacy and extension programs at the farm level to make the farms, to help the farmers become knowledgeable about modern practices and to utilize modern practices. That would be number one. He would be the first to say that it's not technology alone, but the ability and the education of the human capital development for him was very, very important, both among scientists as well as among farmers.
Another question over here.
Yeah, I fully support the comment that I just heard from the delegate from the Caribbean, and I was very impressed by Dr. Pena's presentation. It's actually one of the things that concerns us a lot when we look into the long-term development and the move, the nutrition transition away from undernourishment today to, well, better nourishment, higher calorie levels in the future. If you put that nutrition transition into the context of the Barker hypothesis, you essentially get a scenario where we have a transition from today's undernourishment situation into a situation where we have massive problems with NCDs, with obesity, with type 2 diabetes, and so on and so forth, without at the same time having the remedies that exist in developed countries today for developing countries. So what we could end up with is a scenario where we move away from, say, a food poverty situation into a health poverty situation in the future. And, you know, it's a real dilemma in which we are when we talk about addressing food security problems today, well knowing that actually we just morph it into perhaps even a worse situation in the future.
Yes. Dr. Pena? Yes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, I think excellent comments. I think that for Latin America and the Caribbean, it doesn't apply the same indicators as for Africa or other regions. If we take that into account, let's say, if in some assessments of the nutritional status in many countries, let's say Chile and in the Caribbean, you may find that those obese persons are really deficient in micronutrients. It is usually appears that they have osteoporosis, anemia, and let's not talk about zinc and other micronutrient deficiencies. In other words, there are people that have put a lot of weight. They have usually a background of or a history of undernutrition or prenatal undernutrition or early undernutrition, and then having different pathways, the so-called epigenetics, develop a different thrifty trend, and then it's produce a lot of complications in the life. And what it is critical is that those people are poor, but they are very likely to suffer non-communicable disease, let's say diabetes or hypertension, that is extremely expensive to be treated adequately. And the health services of our countries are not ready to really tackle in the way it is. Therefore, when we are talking about the determinants of health, we have to bear in mind all these influence because it applies really to all these regions. Thank you for really a very good comment.
Yes.
If I could just add on that too, because I think that this is a critical point, that it isn't always, let's say, sort of a transition in the population from undernutrition to overnutrition problems, but often within the same family you find both undernutrition problems and overnutrition. So it is really, I mean, it really has to be looked at the same time. Exactly.
Good point. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I was very struck by Mr. Pena's presentation, in particular when he was talking about the social.
Can you get a little
closer?
Oh, there you go.
Okay. especially when he was talking about the economic and social determinants for malnutrition, and the top of the list was illiteracy. And of course today we heard a lot about the impact of trade and markets and inputs and supplies and so forth, but I wonder if not actually investment in girls' education might not be one of the key entry points to malnutrition and food security.
Yes, this is an amazing issue. There are some information here that has been published recently in which said the influence of education is not only a matter of illiteracy or primary level of education. The difference between illiteracy and the primary education instruction for mothers, and if you compare primary to secondary, it is even sharper between secondary and primary than between primary and illiteracy. Another way, when we talk about instructions and educations in general, it should be a permanent issue, because otherwise it creates, that kind of handicap in the development. And the other thing that I think is important, as was mentioned, in Peru, 40% of the stunted children have mothers that are obese. I'm talking, this is a Marie Ruel presentation, and she had done this study in different countries. What we're talking is, and I agree totally with you, that at the same household you will find obese, usually mothers with stunted children. But I think education is perhaps the determinants more associated to stunting than any other. And the gender issues, if you add both of them, it practically explains more than 50% of the variance. It doesn't mean that we have only to tackle those. No, the problem is we're talking like a symphonic orchestra. We need all the instruments. Otherwise, we're having gaps, and the result wouldn't be the suitable one.
Thank you. Very good. Any other questions? Yes, two gentlemen back there, please.
David Lambert. We know that all of our institutions have a lot of pride, and it's always invented here. And in our own country, we have problem with our ministries in Washington talking to each other, that the Department of Agriculture would